I want Mississippi to see this picture of diversity from all over Mississippi that are saying we're going to be engaged. Now, we're here tonight, but I came by invitation. I didn't just say I'm coming. I don't believe in helicopter leadership. The pastor and others and Danielle and others said, would you come? And I said, gladly. Because my brother is right, and each speaker has been right. This is about how we go forward. Right now, we're talking about the Senate. There are other races, but the Senate, the most powerful 100 people in the country, the Senate, the U.S. Senate, 100 votes that can determine everything from who sits on the Supreme Court to war. 100. We also know that joking about public lynchings and hangings is beneath any run for the Senate. I'm not talking about Democrat or Republican, I'm talking about morality now. We know that saying that you want to suppress the votes of college students is beneath what we are called to be in this country, beneath it. We also know, I would want you to know that we are in the middle of major transformation, and the very fact that you are having a runoff in Mississippi with a white woman and an African-American male, just that dynamic. I ain't talking about the party. That in itself is a step in the right direction. I want to talk tonight about if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. I thought that might come home. We used to say if we ever needed the Lord, we sure do need, but we know we need the Lord all the time. But if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. And I want to list for you 5 reasons. I want you to take them and take them out. I want you to take them out everywhere you eat turkey tomorrow. I want you to take them out Friday, Saturday, wherever you go. I want you to talk about it in church, synagogue, mosque, wherever you are. The hair salon, the barber shop. Everywhere. 5 reasons. Turn to your neighbor and say, if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. The first reason is because of the problems that politicians are not addressing. That ought to be a reason we vote. Somebody's hurting people, and it's gone on far too long. And we have to decide with our vote that we won't be silent anymore. We need to vote and have a movement. We need to have a movement that votes. We vote on Tuesday, we keep building the movement afterward. But we need to vote. Right now in this country, in the America, there are 140 million poor people in this country. 140 million, not 39. 140 million poor people. That's 43.5% of this entire country is poor and low wealth. There are 37 million people in this country without health insurance. We're the only country of the 25 wealthiest countries that does not provide some form of health care for its citizens. There are 4 million families that go to bed every night, get up every morning, and they can buy unleaded gas and can't buy unleaded gas, but can't buy unleaded water. Nearly 53 cents of every dollar discretionary we spend goes toward war and militarism. And less than 16 cents of every discretionary dollar goes toward public education and health care and the things that lift people up. The average CEO of a military defense contracting company makes $19 million a year, while the average combat soldier makes less than $30,000 a year. You see him raise his hand? Less than $30,000 a year. And some of them, when they come out of combat, have to get on food stamps just to survive. You say, but that's America. Well, the reason we don't have time, and it's beneath us to be talking about public lynchings or whatnot, in Mississippi, 52% of Mississippians are poor and low wealth. 1.5 million people. Now notice I didn't say black people, I said people. And I want to point something out. 59% of all the children in Mississippi are poor and low wealth. That's 437,000 children. 53% of all women, all the women raise your hand, 53% of all women in Mississippi are poor and low wealth. That's 816,000. 67% of people of color are poor or low wealth. That's 843,000 people, many of them working poor, because the largest number of poor people in this country are white women and children and working. 40% of white people, 40% of white people in Mississippi are poor and low wealth. That's 668,000 people. From 1979 to 2012, the top income for the top 1% grew by 80% in Mississippi, while the bottom 99% only went up by 11%. You have real issues here. And too many politicians want to distract us with side issues, as somebody said, you know, prayer in the school, where you're at on gay people, waving the Confederate flag, and those kinds of things. But they don't want to address the real issues that are facing Mississippians. And joking, or saying you're joking about public hangings and suppression of vote is not going to help poor folk have a better day. In order to address poverty, we're going to have to address the issue of living wages. We're going to have to address the issue of health care and public education. And I don't have to ask, I don't want to talk about Democrat or Republican. I simply have to say to you, you have to make this choice. Do you believe that giving more tax cuts to the greedy and the wealthy will help the 1.5 million poor people in this state? If you do, then vote for the candidate that will do that. But if you don't believe that, and you believe that we need to be focusing on things that really matter, then vote for the candidate. That's not Democrat or Republican. That's about right versus wrong. That's about morality. That's a decision. Because poverty is a real issue. And you need to look at both of these candidates and where do they stand on the issue of poverty. And the reality is, my brothers and sisters, there has always in the South, ever since the days of slavery, post-slavery, and civil rights, there's always been an attempt by a rich, greedy oligarchy that wants to control control the Congress. Because see, in the South, if you can control 13 states, you control 26 members of the United States Senate, 31% of the United States Congress, and you control over 170 electoral votes. All you have to do is control 13 states from Virginia to Texas. And you control, that means you only need 99 electoral college votes from the other 37 states. You only need 25 senators from the other 37 states, and you only need 20% of the representatives from the other 37 states if you can just control Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and Texas, and Kentucky. That's what this is really about. If you control the South, you control the nation. But the only way you can control the South is you've got to pit white people against black people. You got to pit poor white people and working class white people against poor and working class black people and poor and working class Latinos. Dr. King said it in 1965 at the end of the Selma to Montgomery March. He said, there's always been this a game by what he called the Bourbon class or the aristocracy in the South. And it says what they do is anytime there is the potential for black and white and brown people to come together to form political power, there's an attempt to feed white constituencies the stale bread of racism and the spoiled meat of Jim Crow. So you need to understand, when anybody starts using divisive language, it is not a sign of your weakness. It is a sign of the potential power and transformation that's right at the door. And you and I have to decide here in Mississippi, right? Because the bottom line is, if you, I say it everywhere I go, if you're black and you're poor and working poor and you can't pay your light bill and you're white, and you're poor and working poor and can't pay your light bill, and you're brown and you're poor and working poor and can't pay your light bill, when the lights go off, we all black in the dark. Do you hear what I'm saying? If you have to choose between feeding your child and not feeding your child, and your child cries, they don't cry black, they don't cry brown, they don't cry white, they don't cry Native American, they don't cry AIDS, they cry pain, they cry hunger. Huh? And the poor people, did you hear that? 1.5 million, 1.2 million poor people in this country, in this state, hold the key to political transformation. This is the body they do not want to be organized. But guess what? They got another thought coming, because we're coming together and we're organizing. In Mississippi, you have to work 82 hours. 82 hours at $7.25 just to possibly be able to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. You got to work 2 weeks in a week. That's why I say to preachers all the time, wherever I go, any preacher in the South, where it's poor particularly, that's not fighting for their people to have a living wage, but then asking them to give to their pastor's anniversary and the tithe, is committing a sin. That's a sin. Because Jesus said in Matthew 23, he said, you do all these other things, you tithe it up, but you have left undone the weightier matters of the law, which are justice and faith and mercy and kindness. And these are the problems that you got candidates that don't want to deal with these issues. That's why you have to vote, to put people in that will face these issues. In this state of Mississippi, there are 351,000 people without health insurance. Now, for every 500,000 people with health insurance, without health insurance, there's a Harvard study that says 2,800 people die. Which is why, pastors, a group of us as ministers, some of y'all might want to join. We've made a pact that if anybody dies in our church from the lack of health care, we're going to do like Emmett Till's mama did, and open the casket, invite all the cameras in, and we're not going to say God called that person home. We'll say God will welcome them home, but we're not going to lie on God. We're going to say that's the result of government policies. That's the result of greed, because it doesn't have to be this way. And in Mississippi, if your senators and House members and governor and legislature had voted to expand health care, the Affordable Care Act, that, by the way, they call Obamacare to racialize it, but the name of it is the Affordable Care Act, and it actually helps more white people than it does black people. They racialized it and blocked it. If they had not, 200,000 of the 351,000 people in this state would have health care. Many of them people who are veterans or people who are separated from the armed services. Right? We need to ask in this election when we vote, it's not about Democrat or Republican, which one of the candidates wants to expand health care? If you don't believe the 351,000 people in Mississippi ought to have health care, then vote for the one that doesn't want to expand health care. Vote for the one that wants to protect the insurance company. But if you believe that 351,000 Mississippians need health care, then vote for the candidate that says, I'm going to expand health care. I'm on the side of the people of Mississippi. That's what this election is about. These are the real issues, the real, as my sister said, nitty-gritty issues every day. The way who you elect can determine in many ways who will live. I don't mean they have the power of God, but they can put in place policies, because policies destroy people's lives. Poverty is caused by policy, it isn't caused by laziness. You don't raise the wage because it doesn't matter if you're lazy or you work hard. The wage gets raised by votes, by who votes to raise the wage. And by the way, it is utter hypocrisy for you to run for the United States Senate and know that when you get elected, the first thing you're going to do when you go for orientation is sign up for free health care. Think about that now. As a senator, the minute you get elected and you go for orientation, you get free health care paid for by the tax dollar. Not just any health care, the best. And there's no pre-existing condition. And you can't ever have it taken away from you once you once you get elected. How hypocritical is it for you to accept health care paid for by the people, but then you don't want the people that in your own state that have the same thing that you have? That's what this election is about. And then on this pre-existing condition, this is not partisan, this is the fact. There's a group of senators already there that want to say they want to end the Affordable Care Act's provision that says an insurance company can't deny you or your child because of a pre-existing condition. Where do the candidates stand? If there's a candidate here running for office that believes that insurance companies should be able to deny people because of pre-existing condition, and you believe that people ought not be able to get health insurance for cancer just because they have a pre-existing condition, then vote for them. But if you believe that we ought to have the ability to get insurance, even if you have a pre-existing condition, then vote for that person that wants it. Because, first of all of us have pre-existing conditions. I mean, theologically, we're born in sin and shaping in iniquity. So all of us got a deficiency, right? But I want to read for you the list. Let me see, because this group of the Republicans already there, they want to make arthritis a pre-existing condition. They want to make acne, like bumps on your face, and a pre-existing condition. They want to make domestic abuse. If your husband or your wife beats you, that's a pre-existing condition, and therefore the insurance company don't have to cover you. They want to make C-sections a pre-existing condition. They want to make heartburn. Yes, sir. That's what I said. Now, Reverend, I will tell you that I got 4 more points. I'm not going to promise you tonight somebody ain't going to cuss in your church. Pray for them. Because the more I was somewhere and I was teaching this stuff, and somebody hollered the same thing that Jesus did when he saw that fig tree, like a politician putting on leaves with no fruit. And Jesus told that fig tree, you better have some fruit on you when I come back by. And when Jesus came back by, the fig tree didn't have any fruit on. And you know, Jesus said, damn. I mean, excuse me. He said, but that's what he said. That's what he said. And one day I was in church teaching this, and a woman hollered that out. I said, it's all right, sister, it's all right. So just pray for your people, Doc, if one of them do that, because they're going to be like Jesus. Because this stuff will actually make you angry. I don't want you mad. You can be angry and sin not. I want you to have righteous indignation and go out here and go to work. Yeah. And yeah, heartburn. And you know goodness well if you eat enough catfish with hot sauce, you're going to have a case of heartburn. No insurance company ought not be able to block your ability to get insurance for cancer or heart attacks because you have been diagnosed with heartburn or acid reflux. But that's what some folk want to do. Huh? Then there's a second reason. Not only must we vote because of the problems politicians are not addressing, we must vote because we need a check on this president. My God, we don't need another senator that's going to sit there and be quiet and go along with what this president is doing. And this has nothing to do with whether you're a Democrat or Republican. When you have a president of these United States that stands up and says, I'm a nationalist, and knows that that's the language of white supremacy, that's the language of fascism, and you had the French president correct the American president, something wrong. When you have a president that wants to use the Attorney General's office to go after his adversaries and break the, even Justice Roberts today The Supreme Court justice, who is a Republican, he spoke out today. We need a check on this president. Huh? And you know goodness well, if Obama had thought one of the lies he's told, talk to me somebody. I didn't say told one of the lies he told. If Obama had said, I think I might lie. It would have been a mess. And we don't need to continue to send someone who's going to just kowtow and go along. No. None of that stuff is helping Mississippians. Huh? All the antics the president, it hasn't helped Mississippians. It hasn't helped poor people in Mississippi. It hasn't helped Mississippians with health care. No. And we need a check. Somebody write that down, a check on this presidency. And then we also need to vote because of the South's persistent plan to divide. I want you to look around this room real good. Everywhere we go at the moral, Poor People's Campaign, the National Call for a Moral Revival, we insist that it be diverse. I almost had folks stand up and say, go sit with somebody that you don't, in fact, do it anyway. Find somebody you didn't come in here with and just switch around a little bit. But mix this up. Mix this salt and pepper up in here. Stop being segregated. Yeah. Come on, let's check. Come on. Find somebody and let them get right. As my grandma said, get twixt and tween you. And some of y'all come on a little closer to the altar. Y'all standing back, come on up here. Move up here a little bit closer to these front rows. It's not going to bite you. Come on here. If you're going to get up front as a sign that you're going to vote. You're not scared for the camera to see you. He's going to turn it around anyway. Come on. Now, if you're beside somebody you didn't know before you came in here, maybe they don't look like you, they're not the same race as you, the same sexuality as you, but ask them, are you sick of the division? Ask them. Now tell them, if you're sick of it, tell them if you're sick of it. Well, now turn back and say, well, let's do something about it. Because they've been playing that game long enough. Long enough. Dividing people. It's gone on long enough. When it comes to systemic racism, systemic poverty, ecological devastation, the war economy, and the false moral narrative, religious nationalism, all people, regardless of your race, your creed, your color, ought to be standing up together and saying, we resist the division, and we need to do it not only with our mouths and with our actions, but with our votes. Because this plan was set in place years ago, but most recently was set in place in 1968. Dr. King was killed. Richard Nixon came up. His political advisor, Kevin Phillips, looked at Richard Nixon and said, I can tell you how to win American elections for the next 50 years. We've got to take the South, but the only way we can do it is we got to find a way to make people hate one another. And we got to play them, and we can get some money to do this, and we're going to use code words like the things we're going to focus on are forced busing and states' rights and anti-gay and prayer in the school and anti-abortion and gun rights and tax cuts. And we're going to make people think that their problems are because of other people. And while they are fighting, we're going to take all the money out through tax cuts. Huh? And you know, it's one thing when somebody fool you and you don't know anything. It's their fault. But once you find out they're fooling you, if you let them fool you again, it's your fault. How many of your mama didn't raise no fool? How many of your mama, touch your name and say, my mama didn't raise no fool. My mama. There's a fourth reason why we have to get out to vote. Y'all writing these down? And this is because voting has a theological perspective. You notice I haven't said anything about partisanism, Democrat and Republican, because I don't have to, because when you know the book, you can talk about God's politics. See, and I got sense enough to know, see, I know the book. Now I know that when people, there's this group that said, we are so-called right-wing or conservative Christian. No, first of all, there ain't no such thing in the Bible as a right-wing or left-wing Christian. There's no such thing as a conservative or liberal. You either Christian or you're not. Right. And there are over 2,500 scriptures in the Bible that talk about what God is concerned about in terms of love and justice and how we treat one another. Right. And so when people want to I say, first of all, the politics of God, I told you, Isaiah 10, woe unto those who legislate evil and rob the poor of their rights and make children and women their prey. That's the book. I grew up in a situation where before I could get my biscuit, I had to quote a scripture, so I make the book talk now. You want to talk about the book? Come on, bring it on. Right? Jesus gave me my political way. Jesus said, here's the politics of Jesus. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he hath anointed me to preach good news to the poor, healing to the brokenhearted, recovery of sight to the blind, liberty to them that are bruised, and then to declare the acceptable year of the Lord. Matthew 25 is my politics. When I was hungry, did you feed me? As a nation, the Bible says he will say to the nations, when I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was an undocumented stranger, did you welcome me in? When I was a sick, did you care about me? We got these politicians, and you got to check out who's running here. They want to put their hand on the Bible and raise their other hand and swear themselves into office, and they don't know what's in the Bible, and they don't abide by what's in the Constitution. Because there's no way you can know what's in the Bible and be against health care. There's no way you can know what's in the Bible and be against living wages. It's just not possible. And there's really no way you can really know what's in the Constitution, because the first principle of our Constitution is to establish justice. The second one is to ensure domestic tranquility. The third is to provide for the common defense. And the fourth is to promote the general welfare of all people. Those are the moral principles. And if you want to get elected, and then you get elected, and instead of establishing justice, you establish injustice. Instead of you promoting the tranquility, you promote division. Instead of you providing for the common defense, you provide for the few. Instead of you promoting the general welfare, you promote the welfare of only the wealthy and the rich. You are in constitutional violation. And so if somebody's already telling you before they get elected, why would you elect them, allow them to be elected, and then so they can lie when they put their hand on the Bible and swear to uphold the Constitution? We need to keep some of these folk running home so they don't have to tell a lie. And you need to check out. And then the last thing is a theological thing you see, because every poor state in America is a voter suppression state. I want to teach this real quick and I'm through. Every state, there's 26 of them that suppress the vote, and all 26 of them have the highest poverty rates, because when you suppress the vote, it's directed at black people. But what it does is it allows people to get elected, and once they get elected, they pass policies that hurt all people. Watch this now. Suppressing the vote is directed at black people and brown people, and women, by the way. But once the people get elected using racialized voter suppression, they then use that power to pass policies that hurt all people, especially the poor and low wealth. Isn't that a strange irony? That you would get elected through racialized voter suppression, but then use your power to hurt your own people. That's the message we got to get out. That's why we got to hold hands together, y'all. Black and white and brown. Native American, we got to hold hands together. And the only persons we give the right to vote to are people. We don't give the right to vote to parakeets, puppies, and pigeons. Which means that if you suppress my vote, you're saying I'm not a person. I'm not an equal person. I'm not a people, if you will. I don't belong to a people. When you suppress my vote, you are acting like you're God, and you have the right to determine my humanity. And you're going to suppress my humanity. That's idolatry. That's self-worship. Because everybody's been made in the image of God. And if for nothing else, you ought to get everybody you know in your house, everybody you know in your club, in your church, to go vote just to say, we are somebody. God made me. I dare somebody to try to hold back my right to vote. Voting has a theological perspective. So listen, the reason you ought to vote is what? Say the problems. Say it with me. The problems that politicians are not addressing, like poverty and health care. Number two, we need to vote because we need a check on this president. Number three, we need to vote because of the southern intentional division, because of the persistent division. Say, we need to vote because of the persistent division in the South. We need to vote because voting has a theological perspective. And then the last reason we need to vote is because of your power potential. Since I've been in Mississippi, folk have said something to me, Daniel, and I want to address it tonight on live streaming. You all can send this around. I've heard people say, well, Reverend, it just can't happen in Mississippi. There comes a time you have to stop believing other people's lies. When you see people on CNN and MSNBC talking about these are red states, don't pay any attention to that. They don't live here. They don't know the difference. They're just talking. They would say it's a red state if somebody won by 2 votes. That's not a red state. Most of these states are not red or blue. They are voter suppressed, unorganized, disconnected states. And you have power in Mississippi. Touch somebody and say, we have some power. Let me tell you how much power you have. In 2016, there were 2.2 million people in Mississippi eligible to vote. Oh, Lord. And of those, 1.48 million people were registered to vote, which means that 800,000 people that could vote aren't even registered. Touch your neighbor and say, we have power. In 2016, 1.2 million people cast a ballot, but that means 1 million people didn't. Have mercy, Jesus. That means 55% of your voting turned out, but 45% stayed home. When Trump was running, 45% stayed home. In Mississippi in 2014, there were 2.2 million people eligible to vote. Of those in 2014, in the United States Senate race, there was a guy running named Thad Cochran, am I right? And a guy running named Travis Trowers, am I right? But in 2014, there were 2.2 million people eligible to vote, but only 600,000 voted. You got power that's not even being used. There was 1.6 million people that didn't vote. Only 29% of Mississippians voted in 2014, and Thad Cochran won by 125,000 votes. You hear what I'm saying? And you had over 1.6 million that didn't vote, and he won by 125,000 votes. Let me go a little deeper. There are 1.3 million white voters in this state. There are 809,000 black voters in this state. If in 2014 only 20 to 25% of black voters voted, that means over 600,000 black voters didn't vote, and Cochran won by 125,000 votes. So you had 4 times the number of people that didn't vote, that if they had voted, they could have changed the election. Y'all better hear what I'm saying. Touch your neighbor and say, we got power. And it's time for us to recognize where we are. If we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. Right here tonight, we are sitting here 399 years since the first slaves were brought to Virginia. Right now. 231 years since the Constitution was written, and we were fractionized as 3/5 of a person. Women were told they couldn't vote, and white men that didn't have land were told they couldn't vote. Here we are 166 years after Frederick Douglass said on a July 4th speech, he said that America's July 4th celebration was nothing but fraud, bombast, and hypocrisy until America does right by the sons and daughters of slaves. Here we are 155 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation and 153 years after the end of the Civil War. Here we are tonight, 64 years since Brown versus Board of Education, and 63 years since the brutal murder of Emmett Till, and 54 years since Fannie Lou Hamer said there comes a time when you got to get sick and tired of being sick and tired. Here we are, 55 years since the murder of Medgar Evers, and 55 years since the March on Washington, and 55 years since 4 girls were blown up in a Birmingham church because of a loudmouth governor spreading all of his vitriol. Here we are, 54 years since Swanner, Cheney, and Goodman, 54 years since the signing of the Civil Rights Act, 53 years after Bloody Sunday, 53 years after the Voting Rights Act, and here we are 53 years after Malcolm was killed, and 50 years after King was killed, and 10 years since Barack Hussein Obama was called everything but a child of God, but when he walked into the United States Congress, they still had to call him Mr. President. I'm here to tell you, we stand on the shoulders of black and white and brown people who fought too much, who cried too much, who gave too much for us to sit down now. Do I have a witness? If we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. I was talking to one of my Jewish rabbi friends, and that rabbi told me, he said, Reverend Barber, I want you to tell the folks something down in Mississippi. I said, what is it? He said, do you know what the word for voice is in Hebrew? I said, what is it? He said, koil, K-O-L. I said, what does that mean? He said, do you know what the word for vote is in Hebrew? I said, what? He said, koil. K-O-L. I said, wait a minute, my Holy Ghost imagination. Are you trying to say to me that the same word in Hebrew for voice is the same word for vote? That your vote is your voice and your voice is your vote? I said, help me, Jesus, somebody. I said, and then I started searching through the scripture, and I read over there where Job said that God's voice was like thunder. It was coil, and that when the people of God let God speak through them, then their voice is like thunder. I come by Mississippi to tell you that it's time for some thunder to come out of Mississippi. It's time for your voice to be your vote. You ought to thunder against racism. You ought to thunder for health care. You ought to thunder for living wages. Come on, Doc, and help me with some gospel here. You ought to thunder for immigrant justice. You ought to thunder to put a check on this president. And you ought to know that the people that we come from, they did more with less. With less, they beat slavery. Do I have a witness here? With less, they beat Jim Crow. Do I have a witness here? With less, they beat lynchings. Do I have a witness here? With less, they beat the KKK. Do I have a witness here? With less, they won labor rights. They did more with less. We must do more with more. Harriet Tubman got 500 slaves out of slavery. All she had was moss on the north side of a tree, a North Star in the middle of the night, a .38 pistol in case any of the slaves wanted to go back. And she said, no, you ain't going back. Now, you're going to be free, but you ain't going back. She didn't have, hey, God, she didn't have Facebook. She didn't have texting. She didn't have Twitter. She didn't have a car, but she had faith in God. She did more with less. We must do more with more. So turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, play it on the organ. Say, neighbor, you need to tell everybody you know. You need to get everybody you know. You need to call everybody you know and tell them if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. Do I have a witness? I don't want that yet. I don't want that. I want gospel. I want like you do for him. And let me tell you something. You need to tell your folk that faith is what you do with what you believe about God. And works is what you do because of what you believe about God. And when you put faith and works together, then you end up with power. I feel my hope coming in here. Yeah. And I'm telling you, every time we put our faith together with our works, God shows up. When Moses was at the Red Sea, he got scared of the people. And he said, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. But God said, I didn't tell you to stand still. What's in your hand? Stretch out what's in your hand. He said, Moses, go to work and watch me show up. And I'm a witness that when Moses stretched out his hand, used what was in his hand, God showed up. The winds came down. The Red Sea stood at attention and opened up when Shadrach, Meshach, and that bad Negro went to work. God showed up in the fiery furnace when Daniel went to work. God showed up and made a pillar out of every lion. When Esther said, if I perish, I perish, but I'm going to see the king. God showed up when a woman with an issue of blood touched the hem of his garment. God showed up and made a way out of no way. Lord have mercy. When a little boy gave his fish to Jesus, God showed up. Cornbread and catfish fell out of the sky. When Thurgood Marshall went to the Supreme Court, God showed up. When Rosa Parks sat down, God showed up. When Medgar Evers and Dr. Henry stood up, God showed up. And when Jesus went to the cross and did the work on the cross, yeah, he died on Friday. He stayed dead all weekend long. But Sunday morning, God showed up. Do I have a witness? Won't God show up? Won't God show up? If you do what you're supposed to do, God will show up. I believe if you vote, God will show up. I don't know what he's going to do Tuesday. I don't know what he's going to do next year. But I believe if you vote, God will show up. Love will show up. Justice will show up. Tell your neighbor, say, neighbor, if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. And if we do, God will show up. Say yeah, say yeah, say yeah, say yeah. Touch your neighbor and say, neighbor, don't believe the lies. They're trying to discourage you. If you tell them, say, if you didn't have power, they wouldn't suppress your vote. If you didn't have power, they wouldn't try to shut you up. But tell your neighbor, say, neighbor, I've shut up for the last time in my life. I've stood down for the last time in my life. I've accepted the division for the last time in my life. As long, tell your neighbor, as long as I got breath in my body and God in my heart, I'm gonna go to work and watch my God do the rest. Do I have a witness? Say yeah. Say yeah. Ain't gonna let nobody turn us around. Say yeah. Say yeah. Hallelujah. 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 I want a black hand to grab a white hand, and a male hand to grab a woman's hand, and a young hand to grab an old hand, and say, Tell them, say, a new South is rising. Tell them, you better come on with me and get in the army. There's a new South arising. Tell them, you better join me in the army, because there's an army rising that will break every chain. There's an army rising that will break every chain. There's an army rising. There's an army. Break every chain. There's an army rising. Oh Lord, that'll break every chain. Come on, y'all know this. Find it. Come on, Doc. That's all, Doc. Say it.
In the name of Jesus.
Say it, baby. That she is. Come on up here and say it right here. Come on, say it.
There is power in the name of Jesus.
There's a power in the name of God.
There is power In the name of Jesus.
To break every chain.
To break every chain. Break every chain. Break every
Now all of us, no matter what faith, sing this. There's an army rising.
There's an army rising.
Do you believe that? From North Carolina to Georgia. Did you see what happened in Georgia? Did you see what happened in Florida? Do you know 20 years ago y'all wouldn't be having a runoff? They would have already wiped you out. But there's an army
rising up.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. To break every chain.
Say it, girl.
Break every chain. Break every chain. To break every chain. Break every chain. Break every chain.
Now I want you to hum just a second, because thousands of people are watching us. And I want them not to see what they might hear on Fox News or MSNBC or CNN, but I want them to see what's really happening down here in the soil of Mississippi. I'm just a visitor. I came because y'all asked me. I didn't come to do no helicopter leadership, because you know this state better than me. I just came to tell you the rest of us are watching. And the rest of us believe in you. And whether all the change comes Tuesday or whenever, change has already come. We just haven't seen it fully revealed yet. That's why this stuff is happening. Sometimes, if you ever noticed in the Bible, the demon always acted up the closer he got to God. I'm going Pentecostal, I'm sorry, dog. I'm part Pentecostal, I'm part Baptist, I'm part Episcopalian. I'm just all mixed up. I just love Jesus. But every time deliverance was about to come, that demon would get to that old lying demon, that old demon of injustice. You got to know the signs of the times. You are the first fruit of a third Reconstruction in America. This year, despite all the craziness that's going on, what you're seeing now is the first fruit of a third Reconstruction. There was one right after slavery, there was one in the Civil Rights Movement, and God has let you live long enough to be a part of the third one. Some of you all were in the second one, but you got to suit up one more time. I see this gray hair around here. Some of y'all have fought in the second one. Some of us are the beneficiaries of the second one. And we've been living off of other folks' sacrifice. We got to suit up. And some of us are going to be the beneficiaries of what happens after this. But you got a role to play. Because you know, Swanner, Cheney, and Goodman couldn't vote, but they fought for the right to vote. Because if you were under 18, you couldn't vote. You had to be 21. So they died when they weren't even old enough to have the right to vote. You don't wait till you get something to fight for it. Movement always comes before miracle. Movement. Oh, you got to move. The Lord said to those lepers, you want to be healed? Start walking. Start walking. You ain't nothing gonna happen till you start walking. And if you weren't so powerful, if the South wasn't powerful in North Carolina, in Georgia and Florida, all this fighting wouldn't be going on. I ain't telling you who to vote for. I'm talking just reality. Trump wouldn't be coming down here if he wasn't scared. You know goodness well, ain't nobody never paid this much attention to Mississippi. Talk to me. Ain't no election. They normally just write y'all off. We got to know when birthing is taking place. You see, my brothers and sisters, a Sikh sister, I take wisdom from a lot of places. And then come on, Danielle, and stand there, because y'all, they're going to do a little organized. Don't leave after I speak. They got some things we need to do. Because I believe in the kind of altar call, when you hear a word, you act on it. But I was talking to Pastor, and you can use this. I'm going to just have a conversation with your pastor. So I was with this Sikh sister. But I'm smart enough to know the Holy Ghost can move on anybody, just like it did in the Bible when a foreign king, God would use that king, you know. So this Sikh sister told us one day when all this stuff happened with Trump getting elected, and people were so sad. I had told folk, I said, stop saying this is the worst we've ever seen. Are you crazy? We've been through slavery. We've been through the Holocaust. This ain't the worst we've ever seen, and we beat worse than this. Right? You see what I'm saying? But then, this Sikh sister, she said, Reverend Barber, she said, some moments in history, you got to decide whether it's a tomb or a womb. I said, what? I said, what you talking about? I said, well, I put my Holy Ghost ears on. It didn't matter that she was a Sikh. I wanted to start hearing what God. She said, no, no, you understand. She said, both are dark. A tomb is dark and a womb is dark. The difference is, one of them, if you're in a tomb, you can't move. You have to stay in the dark. But if you're in a womb, all you got to do is push. And that don't mean pray until something happens. That ain't what I'm talking about. Because somebody told me the other day, said, well, Barber, it's praying time. I said, you ain't said nothing deep. It's always praying time. The Bible said pray without ceasing. That ain't nothing deep. That's an excuse for you not to go to work. It's always praying time. You got to know when it's time to put legs on your prayers. That's what you got to know. It's always praying time. I'm praying right now while I'm preaching. I pray without ceasing. But we can determine that this dark moment in our nation's history, where we're seeing all this meanness and division and hatred, we ought to declare, just do like this. Are you alive? Just check yourself. Are you alive? Are you alive? Well, then it ain't a tomb. This is a womb. That's all this is. And the pain is just the constrictions. But if you push, we can birth a new America and a new Mississippi and a new North Carolina and a new Georgia and a new Florida. What happened in Georgia was the birth pains. What happened in Florida, those are nothing but birth pains. And God has decided, watch this and I'm through. God has decided to make Mississippi pregnant. Huh? And I don't know when all of the delivery is coming. I don't know if this push on Tuesday is going to bring it further or what. But I know one thing. You better push. And tell everybody, if we ever needed to vote, we sure do need to vote now. Come on. I'm going to give this to Danielle. We love you. Thousands of people have watched you tonight. I thank you for letting me be a part of your family. I hope, Reverend, I've said something that will inspire people to go to work. Sing that song, girl. Sing it.
To break every chain, break every chain, break every chain. There's an army rising.